Hey, 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 all right, go ahead and get out your 8.4 and 8.5 notes. This video will cover protists and fungi. Okay, so protists, we said in class already, it's the catch-all kingdom. So at the top of these notes, write catch-all kingdom. And I always think about the protist kingdom like my junk drawer at my house, right? So if at my house I have a junk drawer in my kitchen, I guess you all do, and in that junk drawer I have scissors, stamps, maybe some lip gloss. I put all the things in that junk drawer that don't have a home, right? So I don't have enough scissors at my house to have just a scissor drawer. So that's where I keep my scissors, or ink pens, things like that, batteries. And so that's really what the protist kingdom is the junk drawer of the classification. If an organism doesn't meet the qualifications of animal, plant, fungi, or bacteria, well, we'll just put you in the protist kingdom. So the protist kingdom is full of organisms with lots of variation. So we wrote at the top, catch-all kingdom, and the kingdom consists of lots of organisms that are different. So, okay, let's go ahead and look. The Protista kingdom, it says means of nutrition. So how do they eat? Most of this kingdom is going to be some do this and some do that. So some are heterotrophs, which means they eat other organisms like us, and that's the animal-like protist. So write in the word beside animal-like protist, write in the word protozoan, because that word means animal-like protist. Protozoan. Okay, and then it says protozoa. And then photoautotrophs, which would mean that they use sunlight, just like a plant. And these are organisms that are like plants. So it's going to be your algae and phytoplankton. And that's what feeds the majority of the organisms in the ocean. So this is what makes food in the ocean. So write that in. That provides the food for all the small fish, which provide food for the larger ones. And then a mixtroph, they can actually do both, and that is the way to go. If you could be an autotroph or a heterotroph, that would be nice. Okay, so how do they move? They use flagella or cilia, just like bacteria do. So this is a picture of protist with the long whip-like structure. That's a flagella. So flagella and cilia are for, you want to know, they're for movement. These are not homologous structures with bacteria. So they didn't evolve from bacteria. The flagella didn't, but they evolved to have flagella also. So that would be an analogous structure. Remember that from evolution. It's a different structure, but they have similar functions. They're extensions from the cytoplasm. They are part of the plasma membrane in prokaryotes and are therefore considered organelles. So in prokaryotes, they have flagella for movement too. So the flagella are believed to have been helical prokaryotes that entered into a symbiotic relationship. So remember bacteria, you watched the video yesterday, the helical, the one I said it looked like an Arby's curly fry. Okay, so how do they reproduce? How do these organisms divide? There's some cilia, little bit short extensions. So how do they divide it? Basically, they just do mitosis. It says, but most are sexually reproducing. Remember, that creates variation. But some are asexual. Asexual is going to be faster, and that would be like mitosis or binary fission, just cell division. Habitats of these organisms, most of them live in the water. So most of the organisms are water organisms. And some of them are parasites, so they would live like in the gut of another organism. Okay, so the theory of endosymbiosis, which is next, is a theory by this lady right here. And you want to flip your paper over and draw this with me. And so a large bacteria engulfed a small bacteria. So there's that. A large bacteria engulfed a small bacteria. And the small bacteria has its own DNA. And so make sure you label what this is, endosymbiosis theory. Large bacteria, label that DNA, engulfed a small bacteria. And because this small bacteria has DNA that's similar to the mitochondria and the chloroplasts, similar, there you go, is similar to the chloroplast and the mitochondria, they think that possibly that small bacteria evolved into the mitochondria or the chloroplast. So that's the theory of endosymbiosis. Okay, and then if you'll take it back to the notes, these are just really examples of different protists. And so the first one is Euglenozoa, and ZOA, that means animal-like. So this one is going to be animal-like. They are two flagellates, so they've got two different flagellas, and that one, the picture actually doesn't show that. So imagine that there's two flagellas. And then most of these are mixotrophic, which means they do cellular respiration. They're autotrophs and heterotrophs. That's what that means. Okay, the next one, Alveolata. It's going to be something that has an alveoli in it, which is a small hole-like chamber. Oh, there's that one. Okay, a small hole-like chamber so you can see the holes. And it says these organisms contain small air-filled chambers. Dinoflagellates are what cause the red tide, and those are going to be what you see those on the news a lot, how it kills a lot of fish. It's toxic to the mollusk, fish, and even humans. So you can see that. The next one is a diatom, and these are so pretty under a microscope. Yellow, brown, green, rich oil, have a strong outer shell, and this is going to be anything that's gritty, like toothpaste has diatoms in it, or anything that has like a sandy taste. Important phytoplankton, so they're important for the food chain because they're algae, so they make they do photosynthesis. Okay, the next one is Phaeophyta, and these are seaweed or kelp, and so they produce brown light-absorbing pigments, and they have iodine in them. So we use iodine in labs sometimes. Okay, and then the protozoas, which we already kind of talked about. There's kelp. Isn't that pretty? Okay, so there's your protozoa, and they're going to be, they move with pseudopods. So that's how they move. They ooze and kind of walk, well, like a pseudopod. It's a false foot. And that's how they eat. They move to their prey and they engulf it. Like an example of a protozoa is an amoeba, and that's what you see here. And the little extensions you see coming out, those are the pseudopods. The next one, there's your pseudopods. Okay, the next one, the fungus-like. Anytime you see MYC, it's going to be fungal. So mitozoa, they're like fungi kind of animals. These are going to be decomposers. So they're definitely heterotrophs like animals. And then plant-like protists are the next ones, and they do photosynthesis. So they're like plants, but they're missing some of the characteristics. Okay, go ahead and flip over, and let's start with fungi next. Okay, so fungi, you know, are going to be heterotrophs, right? They're mushrooms and yeast. So it says about 500 million years ago, Mycota began to colonize the land to break down abundant dead plant material that exists. And so this kingdom is mainly composed of decomposers, right? Organisms that break down dead leaves or dead trees or even dead animals and cycle the nutrients. So right out beside there, cycle nutrients. The kingdom evolved from unicellular protists. So protists would have evolved right after bacteria. They would have been the first eukaryotes. Fungi only resemble plants, but they're actually more like animals because they're heterotrophs, right? They have to eat other organisms. They don't do photosynthesis. And they have a cell wall made of chitin. Interesting thing about chitin is that it's the same thing that's in the exoskeleton of an animal, like a bug. an arthropod is what you're next to say. So remember, plants are made of cellulose. Animals don't have cell wall. Bacteria are made of peptidoglycan. So all fungi have a cell wall made of chitin. And yes, I know it looks like chitin, but it's chitin. Most fungi have a symbiotic relationship with plants called Mycorrhizae. So know what that word means tomorrow when you come to class. Mycorrhizae is fungi that wraps around the tips of roots, and it helps the plant be able to absorb water. And then the fungi gets to eat off the roots. And so Endomycorrhizae is the fungus inside, and then Ectomycorrhizae is the fungus outside. Ecto, endo. That's easy. Okay, if you look at a fungi structure, the hyphae is the little string-like. You can see the hyphae running all through it. And so the net-like structure is the hyphae. It's intertwined to form mycelium. You can see that. Look at the bottom of the picture. You can see it. That extends below the ground. Fungi can grow really fast. And that's why, you look outside and there's not a mushroom, and then the next day there is a mushroom, because they grow very fast. Okay, so how are they classified? They're normally classified based on how they reproduce. So how do they make new fungi? And so there's 6 major phylum listed here. The first one is Chytridomycota, and they reproduce with chytrids. They produce spores. That's the very first one. They produce spores that kind of like sperm. Zygomycota, examples would be Mycorrhizae, Rhizopus. These are all, that's all things that would grow on like strawberries or bread. Penicillium, which is green bread mold, and those are zygomycotas. Glomeromycota, and most of these are going to be inside. Okay, so if you'll go back to this one, I forgot to show you this picture. The Chytridomycota, you can see the spores there. That's the little dots. And then the zygomycota, you can see those. And remember, they're the molds. So there's your bread mold. That's your Rhizopus. And there's your Penicillium. Glomeromycetes, those are going to be Endomycorrhizae. And they have, like as it says in the notes, a tree-shaped connection. Ascomycota next. And these ascus are found in large mushrooms, sort of. So they kind of look like mushrooms. It says ascus are found on the large ascrap or mycelium. Spores are small and dust-like structures. So the spores are on there. They just kind of look like dust. Basidomycota, which is next. These are sexual structures. Basidum found on the large basidocarp mycelium. These are important decomposers. So they're going to cycle the nutrients. Remember that a decomposer cycles. They break down the ligand in plant cell walls. Okay, and then the Deuteromycota, these are going to be what we use, this is what we eat. So Deuteromycota, these are important fungi. The known means of sexual reproduction is sexual, and it switches up. It's not perfect. They don't make identical clones. It's not exactly like mitosis and meiosis. Humans use for yeast, bread, and alcohol production. And so if you look at these, there's your Deuteromycotas. And so that's what we use for yeast and things that make bread rise. Candida albicans, that's going to be what causes a yeast infection. And so like a vaginal yeast infection or mycosis, that means, mycosis just means fungal infection. And then what do fungi do for the ecosystem? They're big decomposers. Some of them can be pathogens like, it says wheat rust, corn smut, Dutch elm's disease. But if you think about, those are plant pathogens. Human pathogens are going to be ringworm, athlete's feet, jock itch, yeast infections, and dandruff. So all of those things, here's your wheat rust, here's your corn smut. So that's a fungus that's infecting the corn. Okay, there's a picture of a ringworm, and that's actually called tinea. The rash is called a tinea, but it's caused by a fungus. And then some fungus are actually used for medicine, like Penicillin. So there's athlete's feet. Ow, that's a bad case. But athlete's feet itches. It's a fungal infection that itches, and actually they all itch. Yeast infections, dandruff is the flaking, but it's caused by a fungus. And then some, like penicillin, are used for drugs. All right, I hope this was helpful.